Hello everyone, welcome to History at Bedtime. Tonight, we step quietly into the sun-baked lands of ancient Egypt, where the Nile flows like a ribbon of life, and the air carries the scent of limestone, mud bricks, and distant incense. A world of grand pyramids, towering temples, and meticulous plans, where every stone placed tells a story of ambition, patience, and the daily struggles of the people who built wonders meant to outlast time itself. A gentle warning: this story may make the past feel startlingly vivid. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the heat on your back, the weight of stones, or the careful calculations etched on papyrus. And that's exactly the point. Let curiosity soften the edges of the present and allow yourself to drift into the lives of those who designed, measured, and labored to shape eternity. Take a deep, calming breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the day slip softly away. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Tonight, we'll wander through bustling construction sites along the Nile, peer over the shoulders of architects sketching designs on papyrus, and follow the careful coordination of laborers moving enormous stones in the heat of the sun. Along the way, we'll uncover their ingenuity, the occasional misstep, and the surprising human moments behind some of the greatest achievements in human history, all while letting your mind drift gently towards sleep. You step softly onto the sun-baked banks of the Nile, the river murmuring lazily like a cat with no particular place to be. There's a warmth in the air, gentle and persistent, pressing softly against your skin as though the sun itself were trying to lull you into a slow, dreamy awareness of the world around you. You probably won't make it through this day, but hey, let's try anyway. Before we wander too far, if you enjoy these nightly journeys through the echoes of history, consider giving a gentle click to subscribe. Perhaps a like, and maybe whisper your location and local time in the comments. I find it strangely comforting to know where my fellow night travelers rest their heads. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The smell of crushed limestone and wet mud fills the air, carried on the wind from the construction sites lining the horizon. Here, architects, though you might hardly imagine them in robes and sandals rather than hard hats, are laying plans for the next monument to endure the millennia. These were the dreamers of their age, wielding reed brushes and papyrus scrolls with a precision that might make a modern engineer's spreadsheet blush. Ancient Egyptian architects were already juggling more than just bricks. They were master planners of space, light, and cosmic alignment. Did you know that the pyramids were often positioned with the stars themselves, particularly Orion's belt? Historians still debate whether this was exact science, religious devotion, or a touch of both. And while these architects sketched, measured, and debated, they also had to ensure that laborers, who were sometimes conscripted farmers, remained motivated, a challenge that could rival modern project management. Some architects apparently carried tiny figurines representing the gods they hoped would bless the building, a kind of spiritual quality assurance. You imagine them patting a little statuette for luck before measuring the next stone, whispering apologies for any misalignment. Two major facts for context. 1. These architects were not slaves themselves. They held a respected position, sometimes enjoying access to courtly privileges. 2. They were often in charge of not only construction, but also maintaining the complex rituals of temple opening and seasonal festivals connected to their structures. And as you walk past the early foundations of a massive temple, feel the quiet thrill that the world was still new in some ways, a vast landscape shaped by human ambition and divine suggestion alike. Remember the shadows shifting over the Nile earlier. They linger still, stretching long and lazy across the papyrus reeds, whispering secrets of labor, design, and the occasional minor tantrum from an overworked scribe. Now, you find yourself wandering through the dusty, aromatic workshops where these architects sketched plans on papyrus. You hear the faint scratching of reed brushes, the occasional grunt of a worker hauling stone blocks, and the gentle plop of water being drawn from the Nile to cool the midday sun's heat. Imagine carrying an enormous block of limestone while balancing a papyrus scroll under one arm, trying not to crush a blueprint with your elbow. Modern multitasking has nothing on this. A major historical fact: Egypt's architects didn't work alone. They oversaw teams of stonemasons, draftsmen, and laborers, coordinating each movement like a conductor of a very sweaty, very dusty orchestra. Another fact: these workers often lived on site in temporary villages, complete with bakeries and breweries, meaning the architects not only designed monuments, but also the microcosms of daily life that kept projects moving. Obscure cultural tidbit: some architects reportedly kept tiny sundials in their pockets, not just to track the day, but to appease the sun god Ra, ensuring the sunlight would fall just right on the entrance of a new temple. There's a touch of humor in imagining a stern, bearded architect glancing nervously at his miniature sundial while a mason trips over a bucket of mud. Historians still debate whether these sundials were practical tools or purely symbolic charms. You pause near a partially carved obelisk. It towers above you, promising eternal grandeur, but whispering hints of the strain it took to bring it from the quarry to the temple grounds. Architects had to predict weight, stone strength, and precise angles. Miscalculations could ruin months of labor. Meanwhile, workers endured the sun, insects, and occasionally the whims of officials eager to see progress. Without patience, you feel the rhythm of this complex human machinery, a slow, mesmerizing dance of design, sweat, and quiet pride. As the sun dips, casting a honeyed glow across sandstone, you notice the playful details: a small carving of a cat near the corner of a wall, perhaps an architect's subtle joke, or a nod to feline protection. You wonder if anyone will ever notice, or if it was meant only for the gods. And as you imagine the next morning's rush of measurement, ink, and stone, you lean back, letting the gentle warmth of Egyptian sun and river breeze lull you into a deeper appreciation of their monumental efforts. You wander further along the riverbank as twilight starts to tangle itself with the reeds, the golden haze softening the edges of stone blocks and scaffolding. You feel the gentle tug of evening settling over the Nile, like a quiet invitation to slow your pace and observe the small, intricate world of Egyptian architecture. You probably won't make it through this night without noticing something extraordinary. So let's set it. Today, you follow an architect named Numhotep, or at least let's call him that for fun, who has the enviable problem of designing a new mortuary temple for a pharaoh who insists it must look divine but not take forever. A major fact: architects had to understand both construction techniques and religious rituals. Their blueprints were sacred, and mistakes were considered both technical and spiritual failings. Another fact: while some pharaohs demanded perfection, they also loved playful embellishments, hieroglyphs depicting humans with animal heads or tiny hidden jokes to amuse those who entered the temple centuries later. Some architects carried small pebbles or charms from the Nile that they would toss onto the building site to invite the river's blessing. It's oddly reassuring to imagine a man in a linen kilt gently tossing pebbles like a magical dice game. Historians still debate whether these charms were purely symbolic or actually intended to affect construction outcomes. The sound of chisels biting into stone punctuates the evening air. You notice workers adjusting ropes and wooden sledges, sometimes cursing under their breath at the sheer stubbornness of granite blocks. Khnumhotep watches patiently, murmuring measurements and celestial observations, knowing that one wrong angle could distort the sun's rays. During a festival, you feel the weight of centuries pressing lightly against your shoulders as you imagine standing here, calculating the perfect slope, thinking about both gods and humans in one breath. A mason accidentally carves a small pyramid upside down, only to shrug and declare it modern art, prompting a chuckle from Khnumhotep. Though he'll quietly fix it later. Remember the shadows shifting over the Nile from earlier. They're back, softer now, brushing the unfinished walls with sleepy fingers of light, reminding you that the day's labor is slowly winding down. Night deepens, and the river's surface catches the silver light of the moon. You step carefully along the sand, brushing past small sketches left behind by architects, lines and angles that promise grand structures but whisper stories of frustration, clever shortcuts, and moments of pure inspiration. You feel the quiet pulse of civilization, alive even in the stillness. Many architects in ancient Egypt also acted as engineers, responsible for moving massive stones, sometimes hundreds of tons, from distant quarries to building sites. Another, they understood the properties of various types of limestone, sandstone, and granite, choosing each material not just for strength, but for color, texture, and how it caught the sun. It's mind-boggling, really, to think they did all this without modern cranes or calculators. Many architects reportedly used small mirrors to check angles and alignment from afar, a bit like the ancient equivalent of using a laser level, though slightly less high-tech and more prone to accidental reflection in a pharaoh's eyes. Historians still debate whether these were practical tools or clever myth-making in later records. You notice a small group of apprentices practicing sketching tiny statues, their hands smudged with charcoal and sand, laughing softly at mistakes. The main architect observes, occasionally correcting proportions, sometimes letting the humor slide, because even perfection-minded builders needed levity, and it's fun to imagine them quietly hiding mini carvings of birds or cats in corners as little inside jokes for the gods and future workers. As the wind whispers through the reeds, you imagine the day's end, tools carefully stacked, plans rolled into papyrus, and tired eyes tracing the outlines of monumental walls. You feel the gentle satisfaction of human endeavor, a slow unfolding of labor and imagination. Remember the sun's golden glow from earlier, now replaced by the soft silver. It illuminates the careful alignment of stones, reminding you that even as the day ends, the dream of creation continues quietly with infinite patience. The sun rises slowly, brushing the Nile with a gentle pink-orange glow, and you step into the rhythmic hum of construction once more. The sight smells of stone dust, wet clay, and faint incense lingering from morning offerings meant to appease the gods. You probably won't make it through this day without tripping over a sand-covered rope or ducking under a low lintel, so move carefully. Today, the focus is on the cornerstone, the symbolic start of a new temple. A major fact: cornerstones weren't just structural, they were spiritual, often inscribed with protective spells and the pharaoh's name to ensure divine favor. Another fact: architects were intimately familiar with astronomy, aligning structures so the sun, moon, or particular stars would shine directly into sacred chambers during important festivals. Think of it as the world's slowest, most precise light show. Some architects reportedly carry tiny, hand-carved figurines of themselves, placing them in hidden niches as a safety net for inspiration, or perhaps just as a way to say, "Hey, I was here, don't forget me." Historians still debate whether these figurines were meaningful ritual items or simple vanity projects. You notice Imhotep adjusting a massive block, guiding a team of laborers with precise hand gestures. He mutters in a soft, dry tone, "Yes, gravity is still undefeated," eliciting quiet chuckles from the workers. The stones seem almost alive, their weight demanding patience, strategy, and occasional humor to keep morale afloat. You trace the outline of newly carved hieroglyphs, each line and curve a story, a prayer or a joke meant to survive millennia. An apprentice accidentally scuffs a freshly polished stone with his sandal, prompting a theatrical sigh from Imhotep. "Ah," he says, "even the gods test our patience with footwear." You can't help but smile at the timelessness of human foibles. As the wind brushes against your skin and the Nile shimmers behind you, you feel the gentle pulse of human endeavor stretching across centuries, reminding you that patience and creativity are as old as the river itself. By midday, the sun bathes the construction site in warm golden light. You walk slowly past partially completed walls and columns, feeling the subtle vibrations of chisels and hammers in the air, like a slow heartbeat of civilization. You probably won't survive the temptation to peek into every carved niche, each one a miniature universe of sacred symbols and practical plans. Many architects often supervised teams that included hundreds of laborers, artisans, and apprentices, coordinating their efforts to move colossal blocks, sometimes over miles of desert terrain. Another fact: many builders relied on ramps made of mud brick and timber to lift stones into place. Ingenious engineering without a single pulley or crane. Imagine juggling logistics, labor, and the pharaoh's whims, all while keeping your sandals dust-free. Impressive, really. Some architects reportedly marked stones with tiny, almost invisible symbols that would only be noticeable under certain light conditions, perhaps as inside jokes or secret signatures. Historians still debate whether these markings had practical or ceremonial significance, or if someone was just bored with granite. You notice the apprentices struggling to lift a small but awkward block, muttering about ancient pranks by stone gods, and Humhotep leans over with a smile. If the stone laughs at you, it's only testing your humility, he quips. The humor is subtle, layered with wisdom, a reminder that work, like life, is easier when sprinkled with light-hearted perspective. And then there's the small but persistent presence of cats, slinking between columns and chasing dust motes, largely ignored, but perhaps silently blessing the project. You remember the early sketches you glimpsed yesterday, the faint lines of future columns, and feel a calm satisfaction. Everything moves slowly here, precisely, with intention. You feel the sun warm your shoulders, the soft hum of labor soothe your mind, and the faint scent of Nile reeds whispering, "Patience, now it's all coming together." Afternoon stretches lazily over the construction site, casting long, mellow shadows across half-carved stone. You walk along a narrow ledge, brushing fingertips against surfaces smoothed by skilled hands, feeling the pulse of ancient labor as if the walls themselves are breathing. You probably won't stop to count every hieroglyph, but the temptation is almost irresistible. A major fact: Egyptian architects often used a grid system, drawn on papyrus or directly on stone, surfaces to scale up miniature models to full-size constructions, a technique centuries ahead of its time. Another fact: Thames weren't just religious centers, they were economic hubs, storing grain, livestock, and treasures. So architects had to consider both sacred symbolism and practical logistics simultaneously. Some architects carried small jars of scented oils and sprinkled them on newly cut stones, believing the aroma encouraged divine favor, or at the very least kept the workday from smelling too much like granite sweat. Historians still debate whether this was religious devotion or just a clever way to cover dust. You notice a group of apprentices experimenting with unusual column shapes, trying to find a balance between artistry and structural integrity. One accidentally trips into a pile of sand, sending a miniature avalanche cascading over his feet, prompting Hanum-hotep to remark dryly, "Ah, the sands of time practice early lessons." You chuckle quietly, feeling the subtle rhythm of daily life, the slow cadence of creation punctuated with minor mishaps and humor. A stray ibis perches atop a half-finished wall, tilting its head at you as if judging your enthusiasm for architecture. The apprentices imitate the bird in a low, clumsy chorus, laughter spilling softly into the warm air. You step back and notice the interplay of sunlight and shadow across carved reliefs, the dust particles floating like tiny golden spirits. It's a moment that seems suspended, a gentle pause in the immense, slow-moving river of history. The late afternoon sun deepens the shadows, turning the construction site into a mosaic of golds and soft browns. You walk carefully along a ramp, feeling the subtle vibration of coordinated labor in your soles, as if the stones themselves hum in time with the Nile. You probably won't resist the urge to pause and imagine the final temple, bathed in morning light, gleaming with carved detail and ritual precision. Architects sometimes lived on site for months, monitoring every cut lift and placement, blending their lives almost seamlessly with the stones they oversaw. Another fact, some temples were designed to create specific acoustic effects so that chants and hymns would resonate perfectly within inner sanctums, a combination of architecture and proto-engineering marvel. Some blueprints included whimsical elements, like animal motifs hidden in carvings, perhaps to amuse future generations or ward off boredom. Historians still debate whether these were genuine playful designs or symbolic protective measures. You observe an apprentice carefully positioning a carved lion head, wiping sweat from his brow. Khnumhotep smiles softly and comments, "Every line has a story, and every mistake is a whisper from the past." The humor here is quiet, understated, like the faint shimmer of sunlight across polished stone. You notice the wind teasing strands of straw that decorate scaffolding, and you feel a profound sense of connection to hands that shaped the world centuries ago. And then there's a moment of levity. An apprentice, overexcited by his progress, nearly topples a small statue. Khnumhotep sighs with mock exasperation, muttering, "Gravity never takes a holiday, not even for young geniuses." You laugh silently, feeling the gentle blend of human error, patience, and creativity that defines this slow, monumental labor. As the sun dips, painting everything in soft amber light, your senses settle into the quiet, steady rhythm of ancient life, ready to drift with the timeless story surrounding you. Evening approaches, and the air is filled with a delicate mix of stone dust and the faint scent of baked clay. You step onto a worn pathway, feeling the smooth, polished edges beneath your sandals, evidence of countless hands who have walked before you. You probably won't be able to resist pausing to imagine the temple's final majesty, as if time itself were unfolding in slow motion around you. Some Egyptian architects relied on star positions to orient temples, aligning key corridors with a rising sun during solstices, blending celestial observation with construction skill. Another fact, large labor teams often sang rhythmic work chants, not just to pass time, but to coordinate the heaving of massive stones, an early form of productivity soundtrack. Occasionally, small, graffiti messages appeared on scaffolding, carved secretly by apprentices, little jokes or doodles meant to be discovered by future generations. Historians still debate whether these were private humor or ritual blessings disguised as casual marks. You notice a pair of apprentices testing a pulley system for moving heavy blocks, giggling as they fumble with ropes. One mutters, "If only the Nile would lend us a hand," and the other replies, "I think it's on break." Hotep watches from a distance, smirking knowingly, his face illuminated by the amber glow of lanterns now being lit along the temple's edges. A curious cat weaves between your feet, ignoring all the chaos, as if it alone understands the delicate balance of art, work, and divine oversight. You smile, feeling the quiet harmony between human effort, animal mischief, and the slow, persistent shaping of stone into meaning. The shadows stretch long across the partially carved hieroglyphs, lending them a soft, mystical aura that makes you feel like a witness to something both immense and intimate. Night begins its gentle descent, the sky turning a muted purple with streaks of soft orange fading from the sun's departure. You step carefully along stone slabs, still warm from the day, your ears catching faint echoes of distant chants and the occasional laugh of tired apprentices. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling slightly mesmerized by the combination of human ingenuity and slow natural rhythms. Temple construction could span decades, with architects passing their knowledge down through apprentices, creating generational continuity in techniques and designs. Another fact: many temples featured hidden chambers and secret passageways, designed both for ritual purposes and to safeguard precious items from tomb raiders. Some workers left tiny clay figurines buried within walls, perhaps as offerings to gods or simple markers of pride in their work. Historians still debate whether these were spiritual rituals, practical markers, or just playful statements of existence. You notice the apprentices finally starting to rest, curling around small fires, while murmuring softly to one another about the day's successes and failures. Hotep moves quietly among them, adjusting a rope here, giving a gentle nod there, the silent rhythm of leadership as unobtrusive as the slow sway of date palms. And then a moment of quiet humor, a lantern flickers wildly in the breeze, startling a young apprentice who yelps softly, and even Hotep chuckles under his breath. You watch as the shadows dance along unfinished carvings, their movements soft and hypnotic like breathing stone. With the night fully settled, your senses ease into the calming rhythm of the temple, ready to drift into dreams, carried by the legacy of patient, creative hands that have shaped the world for centuries. Dawn is a soft whisper on the horizon, spilling muted gold across the limestone blocks that smell faintly of sun-warmed sand. You walk along narrow ledges that overlook partially finished sanctuaries, feeling the weight of centuries in every carefully placed stone. You probably won't make it through this day without marveling at the quiet persistence of these ancient builders. A known fact: ancient Egyptian architects often used simple tools, plumb bobs, ropes, and leveling instruments to achieve astonishing precision in massive structures, long before modern measuring devices existed. Another fact: temples were as much about visual storytelling as religious function, with carved reliefs illustrating myths, daily life, and celestial events in meticulous detail. Some hieroglyphs feature hidden animals tucked into corner spaces, almost like the architect's secret pets. Or perhaps small messages only the cleverest eyes would notice. Historians still debate whether these were intentional Easter eggs or the accidental byproduct of rushed carving. A young apprentice hums a soft tune as he polishes a sandstone pillar, and you feel the rhythm align with your own heartbeat. The smell of wet clay from yesterday's repairs mingles with the crisp air, and somewhere in the distance, a scribe carefully copies a sacred text, its repetitive scratching almost hypnotic. You notice how Namhotep pauses frequently to admire the work, sometimes stroking his chin, as if the stone itself is whispering secrets only he can hear. A small bird swoops in and lands on an unfinished relief, causing the apprentice to wave it off gently while muttering something about divine intervention, or perhaps just morning mischief. Shadows stretch and shift as the sun rises, painting patterns that seem both deliberate and accidental, a reminder that even in carefully ordered creation, nature has its say. The day warms gently, sunlight pouring over the courtyard and reflecting off polished surfaces. You follow the sound of distant hammering and chanting, your feet brushing against scattered tools that glint in the early light. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling the quiet energy of a workforce bound together by skill, discipline, and perhaps a touch of superstition. Also, a known fact, workers were often provided with rations of bread, beer, and onions, simple fare that fueled long hours of precise, exhausting labor. Another fact, some projects required the temporary relocation of entire communities, shifting populations to align manpower with construction needs. I have an obscure tidbit for you. Rumors circulated that certain workers believed the pharaoh's architect could communicate with spirits through carved stone, granting success or misfortune depending on the quality of their work. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were widespread or just whispered among a few superstitious souls. You see apprentices carefully maneuvering blocks, using ropes and levers, the exertion synchronized like a quiet dance. A gentle breeze carries the distant scent of Nile reeds and river mud, reminding you that life beyond the temple continues its steady rhythm. Kamhotep inspects a freshly carved relief, his gaze lingering on the curve of a hieroglyph as if reading an unseen story written just for him. The afternoon sun now bathes the worksite in a golden haze, turning dust motes into tiny, drifting sparks that float lazily through the air. You feel the warmth on your skin, gentle enough to lull you into a slow, steady rhythm with the laborers around you. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing the meticulous care that goes into each stone, each carved line. Ancient Egyptian architects often relied on observation of the stars to align their temples and pyramids with cardinal points, blending astronomy with artistry in ways that modern scientists still admire. Another fact, the use of ramps, levers, and inclined planes allowed workers to move massive blocks with surprising efficiency, showing both ingenuity and an understanding of basic physics. Some hieroglyphic inscriptions suggest that certain construction crews sang songs to coordinate lifting heavy stones, though historians are unsure whether these were work chants or early forms of entertainment. Historians still debate whether these songs actually existed or were just a symbolic depiction in temple reliefs. You wander past a group of apprentices, each sweating and smiling in quiet camaraderie, their hands blackened by stone dust, their eyes bright with concentration. Khnumhotep sketches diagrams on a clay tablet, occasionally glancing at the shadows cast by the late afternoon sun to check alignment. A light breeze carries the scent of baked bread from a nearby courtyard, mixing unexpectedly with a tang of wet sandstone. A small moment of humor. One apprentice, overconfident in his strength, nearly topples a block that another must steady, resulting in a sheepish grin and a shared laugh. You notice the birds nesting atop a nearly finished column, their chirping an accidental chorus to the rhythm of chisels and hammers. Every sound, every movement seems orchestrated into a quiet symphony of diligence and devotion, soothing in its unhurried perfection. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretch longer across the stone blocks, transforming the courtyard into a mosaic of light and dark. You probably won't make it through this day without pausing to appreciate the strange beauty of unfinished work, where potential meets patience. Some Egyptian architects kept meticulous records of material quantities, worker hours, and stone quality on papyrus scrolls, essentially creating ancient project management logs. Another fact, masons and sculptors sometimes had specialized guilds, ensuring mastery of certain techniques, from polishing to carving intricate hieroglyphs. Carvings of small, playful figures, sometimes dancing, sometimes juggling, appear in corners of temples, suggesting a subtle sense of humor among the workers, or perhaps a quiet rebellion against rigidity. Historians still debate whether these were intentional messages or simply decorative flair. You stroll through a narrow corridor, running your fingers over the smooth surfaces, feeling the faint grooves left by countless chisels. A child apprentice giggles as he attempts to balance a small stone on his head, and the laughter echoes softly, bouncing between the walls. The smell of incense from a nearby shrine mingles with earth and stone, creating a strangely comforting aroma. A light-hearted moment, a cat, black sleek and seemingly serious about its role, paces along the ledges, inspecting every stone as if judging the quality of the day's labor. You watch the play of shadows from scaffolding, imagining them as gentle reminders that even in disciplined work, life finds ways to surprise, entertain, and quietly enchant. Twilight settles over the construction site, turning the sandstone into a warm, honeyed glow. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing how the soft light transforms rough edges into smooth silhouettes, as if the stone itself is sighing in relief after hours of shaping. Architects often used plumb bobs and leveling instruments to ensure perfect verticality and balance in their towering structures, demonstrating a precise understanding of geometry. Another fact, large temples were built over decades, sometimes spanning generations, meaning that some workers never saw the projects completed, a humbling reminder of time's patient march. Graffiti left by apprentices on hidden walls suggests they had secret competitions to see who could carve the most imaginative animal figures, including hippos, crocodiles, and mythical creatures. Historians still debate whether these drawings were tolerated, encouraged, or quietly erased by masters. You wander past a row of workers polishing stone blocks, their motions rhythmic, almost meditative. The soft scrape of sand against stone blends with the low hum of evening chatter, creating a lullaby of labor. A faint breeze carries the aroma of roasted dates from a nearby market stall, and you feel yourself relax into the steady pulse of human endeavor. Night descends, and the first stars pierce the deepening blue of the sky. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining how these same stars guided architects centuries before you. A cosmic compass in an ever-shifting world. Some Egyptian temples were aligned with the rising sun on specific festivals, allowing sunlight to illuminate sacred chambers in a precise and awe-inspiring way. Another fact, workers often lived in temporary villages near the construction sites, fostering community bonds and daily routines that included food preparation, games, and storytelling. Some accounts suggest that certain stones were marked with tiny symbols resembling modern doodles, perhaps a whimsical signature of anonymous artisans. Historians still debate whether these were personal marks, instructions, or mere accidents of carving. You walk among the now empty scaffolding, hearing only the occasional creak as it settles in the cooling night. Shadows stretch long across half-finished columns, and the distant laughter of workers, children, fades into a quiet lull. The scent of cooling stone mixes with night-blooming flowers, a surprisingly sweet perfume that soothes the senses. A jackal trots through the empty courtyard, pretending to be the night's inspector, sniffing each block as if judging the day's labor. You notice your own breath slowing, matching the gentle rhythm of the night, as life, work, and time intertwine in a slow, peaceful waltz. The desert night stretches endlessly, but the work never truly feels abandoned. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing the quiet resilience that drifts like a whisper among the stone blocks. Moonlight casts a silvery glow, revealing the intricate carvings on walls that once teemed with color, now softened to subtle shades of time. The Egyptians developed an early form of surveying using sighting rods and leveling instruments, demonstrating astonishing precision in planning massive structures. Another fact, they often transported massive stone blocks from distant quarries using sleds lubricated with water to reduce friction, a clever trick that saved countless hours of toil. Some workers wore tiny amulets while carving, believing that these charms would protect their hands from errors, mishaps, or divine wrath. Historians still debate whether these superstitions were widespread or limited to a few particularly cautious artisans. You wander along a path where unfinished reliefs line the walls, each telling a story that stretches across centuries. The soft scratching of chisel on stone is replaced by the faint whisper of the wind, which seems to carry echoes of conversations long past. A small desert fox pads silently by, its eyes reflecting the moonlight, as if curious about the human endeavors it watches nightly. A young apprentice paints an exaggeratedly huge eye on a stone block, claiming it's the world's first security camera, and the master shakes his head with a wry smile. The stars above mirror the meticulous order below, and you feel the comfort of symmetry and rhythm in both human and cosmic design. Dawn's first light brushes the horizon with soft pinks and golds, and you probably won't make it through this day without marveling at the quiet magic of beginnings. The courtyard glows with a muted warmth, each stone catching the light as if sighing in relief. Some temples were oriented towards specific stars or constellations, reflecting both religious significance and a deep understanding of astronomy. Another fact, the Egyptians used copper chisels for fine carving and harder dolerite hammers for rough shaping, demonstrating a sophisticated knowledge of materials science. Certain unfinished statues show curious marks where artists seem to have experimented with exaggerated proportions, perhaps playing with ideas before committing fully to the sacred form. Historians still debate whether these were deliberate practice pieces or happy accidents of experimentation. You stroll past the rising scaffolding, hearing the distant laughter of workers returning after the cool night. Birds begin to stir, calling to one another across the courtyard, and the faint scent of bread baking drifts from the nearby village. The scene feels alive, yet serene, a world poised between labor and leisure, expectation and fulfillment. An apprentice accidentally knocks a small chisel into a trough of water, and the older craftsmen call it a baptism for your tools. Chuckling softly, you breathe deeply, matching the gentle cadence of the early morning, feeling the day's energy rise slowly but without hurry, a reminder of human persistence and the quiet beauty of repeated effort. Twilight descends, painting the sky in gradients of purple and gold. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling the weight and wonder of what human hands can accomplish when guided by vision, skill, and a touch of stubbornness. Some pyramids and temples align almost perfectly with cardinal directions, showcasing an extraordinary grasp of geometry and astronomy. Another fact, laborers were often well-fed and organized in teams, not slaves as often mythologized, highlighting the complexity of ancient Egyptian society. Hieroglyphs sometimes include tiny sketches of everyday life, like cats lounging on rooftops or birds mid-flight, giving fleeting glimpses of humor and observation. Historians still debate whether these were artistic flourishes or subtle social commentary. You wander slowly through the fading light, touching the cool surfaces of newly carved reliefs, feeling the careful intention in each stroke. The courtyard hums gently, a living testament to human creativity, patience, and care. A master carver jokingly tells an apprentice, "If your statue doesn't anger the gods, did you even carve?" eliciting a quiet, knowing chuckle. You feel a connection to countless generations who stood where you now stand, hands dusty, eyes intent, hearts steady. The evening sky deepens, stars twinkling faintly like distant lanterns hung by gods with infinite patience. A soft breeze drifts through the courtyard, carrying the mingled scents of limestone, earth, and distant cooking fires. You breathe slowly, allowing the rhythm of the day's labor to dissolve into a gentle calm. Shadows stretch and contract in a timeless dance, the stone surfaces glowing faintly under the last light, reminding you that even permanence has a tender, fleeting side. Nearby, the outlines of statues and columns blur gently in your vision, their precise forms softened by dusk, as though the universe itself was sighing in relief. You can hear the faint rustle of birds settling into the trees, the whisper of wind brushing against carvings, and the occasional clink of a tool left by a worker now resting. These sounds blend into a soft, lulling symphony of human effort and natural rhythm. Your thoughts drift lightly over the day's events, the careful strokes of chisels, the playful missteps of apprentices, the whispered jokes of masters, and the monumental vision that guided every stone into place. Each moment stretches, softens, and folds into the next, a quiet reminder that creation is as much about persistence and observation as it is about genius. You feel the desert's cool embrace and the faint pulse of life in the courtyard, letting your eyelids grow heavy, each blink a small surrender to serenity. Time seems to slow, stretching like the shadows across the limestone, until past, present, and imagination blur together in a gentle tapestry of memory and wonder. Finally, your breathing matches the soft cadence of the world around you, steady and even, carrying you into a tranquil sleep. Let the whispers of stone, wind, and history guide you through dreams, where every carved line, every measured block, and every playful gesture of long ago hands accompanies you into a deep, restful night, as calm and enduring as the monuments themselves. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you're not in a deep sleep by now, enjoy the peaceful fireplace background and drift into peace.